So, what if you want to read a little bit more about the discussion of the differences between machine learning and traditional statistics? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of articles that you can go get and read. One is a blog post by Larry Wasserman. He's a very well known statistician, and he wrote a blog post, if you search, called The Rise of the Machines. It's a very good treatment of the distinction and maybe a little bit of a rallying cry to the statistical community to embrace machine learning a little bit better. There was this very celebrated statistician who sadly passed away named Leo Breiman, and he wrote a tremendously well-received paper called Statistical Modeling, the Two Cultures. And much of my thinking really derives from this paper. It's very accessible. It's in the journal Statistical Science. And I would say his approach is quite critical of traditional statistics, or at least suggesting that traditional statistics is lagging behind. And I give you this quote here where he says, in this paper, I will argue that the focus of the statistical community on data models has led to irrelevant theory, kept statisticians from using more suitable algorithmic models, and prevented statisticians from working on exciting new problems. So he kind of takes his own community to task quite a bit. It's a very entertaining article, and it's not quite as dry and academic as most statistical research papers. And I just brought out this wonderful quote that really stuck with me from D.R. Cox. D.R. Cox is another tremendously celebrated statistician. His Cox proportional hazard model is easily one of the top 5 most cited statistical papers. And Dr. Cox was one of the discussants of the paper, and this quote really stuck with me where he said, Professor Breiman takes data as his starting point. I would prefer to start with an issue, a question, or a scientific hypothesis, although I would be surprised if this were a real source of disagreement. But I really like this comment because I do think that really does get at to me, I think of the things that I have the most trouble with machine learning, it's when you're having to both derive and interrogate the hypothesis with the same set of data. I think to me that's the hardest pill to swallow. And then the final article that you might be interested in looking at was an article by David Hand, another great statistician, and he says, classifier technology and the illusion of progress. So this one's a little bit more critical of the machine learning approach, and I'll give you a quote from this that says, so that the apparent superiority of more sophisticated methods may be something of an illusion. In particular, simpler methods typically yield performance almost as good as more sophisticated methods to the extent that the difference in performance may be swamped by other sources of uncertainty that are generally not considered in the classical supervised classification paradigm. So he's basically saying the effort of building a complicated machine learning algorithm is often not worth it. The increase in complexity leads to marginal gains is one of the points that he's making. So it's another interesting paper, quite the opposite from, say, Leo Breiman's paper. So that gives you hopefully enough to go on. For the rest of the course, we're really going to kind of focus on more traditional analysis under the assumption that you're going to be using and managing data scientists to try and come up with parsimonious explanations for your industry or whatever it is you're trying to study. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.